Hello, everybody. Just wanted to talk to you today about this BCLI trade, kind of recap some fantastic moves here. Very interesting. Right around earnings, they were expecting earnings to be a little bit less, and earnings ended up actually coming out, less than what they expected, what analysts expected. But we do have some incredible moves, some parabolic moves kind of going up right after that. And I'll dig in as to what that is all about. So BCLI is something that I spotted. So I've been watching it for several months, and it's been kind of trading in this range. Sometimes this is kind of referred to as the initial stage of the market cycle. Um, this range expansion stage kind of tells you that the longer it's kind of in this range, right, the stronger the upward or downward move would be, presumably, right? Just as a general rule, it's not an exact rule. So I spotted it actually right here on February 13th as it kind of came out of this range. But I didn't really trade it until after earnings, right? You never really want to mess around with earnings. You never know what's going to be said on conference call, especially if you're swinging a particular trade. You increase yourself to overnight risk unnecessarily. And a lot of times earnings conference calls occur after hours. So kind of a perfect storm for disaster potentially. So I waited and I waited and I waited, and on the day that it actually reported less earnings than expected, I did notice that we have this red candle, but it kind of held some significant support, and so I actually got in on this particular day. Next day gapped down a little bit, but I did see some increasing volume. The one volume bar that it got really excited was right here, even though I wasn't in the stock, but I got excited about it because this massive volume bar right here, breaking out of this long range um, phase, telling me that there was a lot of interest in there. And I didn't know if it was retail interest or institutional interest. I just knew that there was a lot of interest in here, kind of going into this earnings. Good day on earnings, even though they were less than expected. But then we see this incredible climb here. And I got out of the trade today in the upper 880s. So, and you can see, we're trading today. It's in the 920s on a day where the market, took a 1,000 point loss yesterday, is currently at a negative, 581 point loss. So just massive sell off, and still, in this fantastic, upward mobility. So let's talk about what's going on. Really, two things. Is this is a company that is involved in a particular product called Neuron. So what do? They're a biotech company. They engage in the development and commercialization of central nervous systems, adult stem cell therapies designed to address really unmet needs of patients with debilitating neurodegenerative diseases. And in this case, it's ALS. And they hold the right to develop and commercialize the Neuron technology, which is currently in phase 3, awaiting FDA approval. And basically, with their current treatment, they're showing significant progress in ALS patients. And so this is huge, and it's as big as actually being promoted on, or at least this type of therapy and drug being promoted on the Ellen show earlier this week. So again, increasing its popularity, especially among retail traders. Certainly the stories are starting to look very nice. Now, I don't have any institutional ownership above, 50 to 60%, really non-existent. The low institutional ownership is something that really had me concerned. But clearly, with the rest of the indicators showing up in this particular trade, really got me interested. So let's take a look at what I was looking at. Well, market cap, I like it to be above 50 million. I really trade anywhere between 50 million to 2 billion. Anything less than that is potentially too risky, and you tend to scare off institutional investors. Anything above 2 billion market cap, institutions can't really make quick buck on those types of stocks. So they tend to, not all of them, but a lot of them tend to kind of stick between that 50 million to 2 billion range. So that's why I like to stay in that range and capture those movements within 1 to 4 days up to a week, right? The other thing I like to look at is the float, right? So here we have, definitely a low float. Really, I consider anything under 25 million a low float. Anything under 10 million would be, a micro float. And really anything above 50 million, obviously it's going to take a lot more volume, a lot more shares traded to get to move price action. But 22 million is good if you want to see some movement. So the other thing I like to look at, and here's the second piece. So the first piece I showed you was the fact that they have this treatment. They're currently in phase 3 clinical trials. The second piece that I really enjoyed witnessing during this trade is hitting 52-week highs. And as a matter of fact, it hit multi-year highs. So as you can see, this is continuing to trade upwards. Now we're at 924, just this continued steady increase. And it looks like it could potentially continue. So and it looks like it hit $10 today. So again, hitting 52-week highs, hitting multi-year highs, definitely something that would keep me interested. Now, what I like to see is all the moving averages in the green. This tells me that it's a bullish indicator. Okay. RSI, when I got into the trade, I believe it was at 76 or 79. I can't remember, but it was still reasonable. RSI is definitely getting up there now. So certainly overextended, but again, too early to call. Gapping up 21% today on a day where the market is selling off like crazy. Good volume today, good average volume, relative volume. Really, anything above 2 is good. Anything above 3 is fantastic. We're sitting at 11. This is consecutive days of just 8 or 9 and above relative volume. Beta is good. Average true range, you like to see that under 1, which is good in terms of predicting volatility. So again, here's a perfect technical setup. We have a good news catalyst. Despite the financial woes, I think they're actually losing quarter to quarter. But anyway, that's what I look at. A few things I want to point out is, as part of my analysis, I do go through and I try to identify, if there's any purchases from insiders. And I like to go to ceo-buys.com. And all you need to do is just go ahead and put in the ticker, and you can kind of see if there's any insiders purchasing this ticker. So nothing recent. Anything within 30, 60, 90 days would be important. This is something that I use when I'm researching and building my trading plan. The other thing I like to look at is the short volume. I like to go to shortvolumes.com. Now remember, short volume is not the short interest. That's different. The short volume is basically the number of shares that traders have reserved to potentially short, but have not yet opened up a short position. Okay, and so today, for example, that percentage is 58%. So 58% of the traders that are out there have reserved shares, or I should say they've reserved 58% of the shares that are out there for potential to open a short position. So as you can kind of see, as the stock continues to get overextended here with the RSI, pushing 90, we start seeing a lot of shares being reserved to short potentially on the back end of this parabolic move, so that people would bet on it going down and ultimately buy into cover somewhere down around here. Who knows? This could continue going if they get FDA approval. It's likely that price is priced in. If they get FDA approval, oftentimes we'll see a particular biotech company get FDA approval on a particular treatment or a drug, and the price goes down. That's because the actual news is priced into the stock. But nevertheless, the short volume is what it is, and there are traders out there preparing to short this should it crack. So anyway, just a couple things that I look at. Clearly not a conclusive list. If you go to my website, I do show you when I prepare my trades everything that I look at. So for example, here's a particular trade on LCTX. I look at price, pattern, float, which we talked about today, market cap as well, volume, relative volume, average volume, short interest, short volume, which we just talked about, the news and the catalyst, any exposure, right? So like on the Ellen show, that's clearly it's not a catalyst, but it certainly adds to your probabilities of increasing your likelihood of winning the trade as it continues to get more notoriety. Average true range, institutional ownership, beta, relative strength index, what the long-term chart's doing, what the current market direction is doing, what the gap percentage is for the day, what stage is it in the chart cycle. Remember, the chart cycle, we have 4 stages, right? We have the initial stage, the markup, consolidation, and then the markdown, and then repeat with this consolidation stage. I have other videos that go through it, so feel free to check that out. I also like to look, before I enter any trade, what the VWAP is, what the bid and the ask spread is, and also look at the time of sales in level 2. And then, of course, moving averages. What I use on my chart are 50 and 20 simple moving averages. So whenever price exceeds that with increasing volume, that gets coming out of a consolidation phase, that excites me. Being mindful of where the earnings are. And then, of course, the SEC filings. I try to stay away from anything that involves financing or bankruptcy or any litigation. Right, it tends to scare off investors. CEO buys, and then I establish what my entry, my stop loss, and my target is, and then what the last signal that I see on the chart. So obviously this is for a different trade, but I do like to identify what that is. So again, just a reminder, look, you cannot go into any trade, blindly. You shouldn't. This game is all about risk management, and you need to prepare. And much like a poker player, you want to increase your odds of winning that hand. Well, in this case, we're increasing our odds of winning this trade by having all these indicators line up. And, we try to be synonymous to professional traders because this is what they're doing day in and day out. So with that, I leave you on a brief trade recap here with BCLI continuing to make incredible moves today, despite the market being what it is. Thank you very much. Have a good day, guys.